What if I told you that stupidity, not evil, is the greatest threat to humanity? It sounds strange, maybe even insulting, but this isn't just a provocative statement, it's a philosophical warning. Because stupidity isn't just ignorance, it's a force that spreads, that infects, that resists logic and defies education. Today we dive deep into the philosophy of stupidity, not just to mock or criticize, but to understand. Because when we understand stupidity, not just as a lack of intelligence, but as a societal phenomenon, we begin to see the world differently. Let's begin. We often equate stupidity with low IQ or lack of education. But stupidity, in the philosophical sense, isn't about brain power. It's about the misuse of thought, the refusal to engage with reality critically. It's a kind of intellectual laziness, sometimes voluntary, sometimes systemic. In fact, some of the most dangerous stupidity doesn't come from the uneducated, but from those who should know better. People with degrees, titles, power. Why? Because stupidity isn't always a personal flaw. It can be a symptom of something deeper. A cultural sickness, a result of comfort, conformity, or fear. The philosopher Carlo Cipolla famously said, "A stupid person is one who causes losses to others without gaining anything themselves." Think about that. Stupidity, in his view, is a kind of destructive blindness. You harm others without helping yourself. And that, he argued, is more dangerous than malice, because at least evil has a motive. Stupidity has none. Hannah Arendt once coined the term the banality of evil to describe how ordinary people can commit horrific acts simply by following orders, by refusing to think. But what if there's also a banality of stupidity, a kind of stupidity that hides in bureaucracy, in slogans, in the repetition of empty ideas? It's the person who says, "That's just the way things are." The one who blindly follows rules, even when they're harmful. The worker who enforces absurd policies because it's not my job to question. This kind of stupidity is quiet, polite, but it's corrosive. It erodes reason, it dulls empathy, it rewards conformity over courage, and worst of all, it's contagious. Why stupidity thrives. So why does stupidity seem to thrive in modern societies? Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German theologian and philosopher, believed that stupidity isn't just a lack of intelligence, it's a moral failure. A person becomes stupid, he argued, when they surrender their autonomy, when they become a tool for someone else's agenda. Stupidity, in this sense, flourishes under totalitarianism, but it also thrives in consumer culture, in blind nationalism, even in democratic societies when people stop thinking for themselves. When life becomes too easy or too overwhelming, thinking is outsourced. To influencers, to party lines, to algorithms. Stupidity becomes comfortable. Thinking becomes a chore. Here's the difference. Ignorance is not knowing. It can be fixed. It's the student who says, "I don't understand," and wants to learn. Stupidity is different. It's the refusal to learn, the unwillingness to question, the proud declaration of, "I already know," even when reality says otherwise. Ignorance listens, stupidity talks, and yet, we've built systems that reward the loud, not the wise, that elevate confidence over competence, that confuse simplicity with truth. Can stupidity be cured? Philosophers are divided. Some, like Socrates, believe that questioning, real questioning, can awaken the mind, that no one is truly stupid, only unaware. Others, like Schopenhauer, were more cynical. He believed that stupidity was so deeply ingrained in human nature that it could only be managed, not eliminated. But perhaps the answer lies somewhere in between. Stupidity can't be cured en masse, but it can be resisted, one mind at a time, the antidote. Philosophy, not in the academic sense, but in the everyday sense. The act of asking why, of of pausing before reacting, of doubting the easy answer. Why does all this matter? Because we live in a time when information is everywhere and understanding is rare. When social media amplifies the confident, not the correct. When shouting gets more attention than thinking. And in this environment, stupidity isn't just tolerated, it's celebrated, monetized. This isn't just a cultural problem, it's a political one, a moral one, a human one. Because when stupidity spreads, it doesn't just make people wrong, it makes them dangerous. So what can we do? Resist. Not with arrogance, but with awareness. Be the one who asks the uncomfortable question, who listens more than they speak, who chooses doubt over dogma. Because stupidity, for all its power, has one fatal flaw. It depends on silence, on unthinking repetition, on the absence of resistance. But the moment someone asks, "Is this true?" the spell begins to break. So keep thinking, keep questioning, keep resisting, not just for yourself, but for all of us. In a world overflowing with data, stupidity isn't about not knowing, it's about not caring to know. And that's the real danger, because the most dangerous kind of stupidity isn't loud or foolish. It's the kind that wears a suit, that speaks in confident tones, that sits in boardrooms, in classrooms, in voting booths, repeating empty phrases with full conviction. It's the kind that looks you in the eye and says, "Don't overthink it." But overthinking, if we define it as careful, critical reflection, is exactly what we need. To be human is to think, to reflect, to doubt, to wrestle with complexity, not hide from it. So maybe the true battle isn't between smart and stupid, but between those who think and those who surrender their ability to think, between philosophy and anti-philosophy. You don't need a PhD to fight stupidity. You just need awareness, a little courage, and the willingness to be uncomfortable. Ask questions, challenge assumptions, even your own, especially your own, because the world doesn't need more noise. It needs clarity. It needs people who choose to think when it's easier not to, so the next time someone tells you, "You think too much," smile. That's how you'll know you're doing it right. Somewhere out there, right now, someone is sitting in silence. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they're still thinking, still wrestling with the world, still refusing to give in to the comfort of certainty. That's not weakness. That's philosophy. And in a world that often rewards blind certainty over quiet thought, choosing to reflect is one of the most radical acts you can commit. So keep thinking, keep doubting, keep wondering, because that is how we stay free. If this resonated with you, if you've ever felt like you're thinking too much in a world that prefers you, didn't, then maybe you're exactly the kind of mind this world needs more of. So don't stop questioning, don't stop noticing, and if you're on that strange and lonely road of thought, know you're not walking it alone. Thanks for watching. There's a strange kind of courage in choosing to see clearly, because once you start to notice, really notice, you can't unsee the things others ignore. You begin to see the scaffolding beneath society's smiles, the quiet tragedies behind polite conversations, the stupidity not just in others, but within yourself, the compromises, the contradictions, the comfortable lies we live with. And when you see all that, the world doesn't get easier, it gets heavier. But maybe that's the cost of awareness, because the alternative is sleepwalking, nodding along, being useful in all the wrong ways, becoming what Bonhoeffer feared most, a willing cog in the machine of destruction. Philosophy, in its rawest form, isn't a set of answers. It's a way of paying attention, a refusal to look away, a discipline of discomfort. It asks us to stop chasing certainty, and instead live with the beautiful, terrifying weight of not knowing. It asks us to wrestle with paradoxes, to carry opposing truths in both hands. It asks us to think, not just smarter, but deeper and more ethically. And maybe that's what saves us, not brilliance, not intelligence, not even reason alone, but conscience, the kind that acts when it would be easier not to, the kind that chooses responsibility even when it's inconvenient, the kind that sees through stupidity, not just as a flaw in others, but as a temptation in ourselves. So maybe that's where we begin, not with outrage at the world's stupidity, but with humility, with vigilance, with the quiet strength to resist the current. And if you're still here, watching, listening, you're probably one of the few, of those who think in a world that punishes thought, of those who feel in an age that numbs emotions, of those who wonder, not looking for answers, but for meaning. So here's your reminder. You're not crazy for thinking deeply. You're not broken for feeling out of place. You're not weak for struggling in a world that rewards conformity over clarity. You're probably awake, and the world needs more people like you. If this moved you, if it gave voice to something you've always felt, share it. Comment below. Subscribe to this channel. Let's continue building a community of thinkers, skeptics, and silent rebels. But here's something even more unsettling. Sometimes the greatest danger isn't noise. It's silence, the silence of bystanders, the silence of those who know better but say nothing, the silence of thinkers who retreat into abstraction while the world burns in concrete ways. Bonhoeffer understood this all too well. He saw what happens when good people remain quiet, when the educated abdicate their voice, when the rational choose safety over truth, because evil doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always wear a uniform or carry a flag. Sometimes it looks like policy, sometimes it sounds like a joke, sometimes it's just a shrug, and stupidity, real, moral stupidity, is often the prelude to that evil. It's the soil where cruelty grows when no one is paying attention. But attention is a choice. We choose what to notice. We choose what to question. We choose when to speak up or when to look away. And in that choosing, we reveal who we are. So ask yourself, where am I asleep? Where have I confused cleverness with wisdom? Where have I excused stupidity, especially my own? It's not about self-hatred. It's about self-honesty. And that might be the rarest form of intelligence there is, because stupidity is easy. It's comfortable. It lets you off the hook. But lucidity burns. It forces you to sit with contradictions. It forces you to act in ways that might cost you something: relationships, careers, peace of mind. But there is no freedom without lucidity. No real humanity either. Maybe that's the real takeaway here. In a world overrun with surface-level thinking, choosing to be deeply awake is a form of rebellion, and rebellion doesn't always look loud. Sometimes it looks like reflection. Sometimes it looks like refusal. Sometimes it looks like the quiet discipline of a person who simply refuses to stop thinking. So wherever you are, in whatever context, keep going, keep asking, keep noticing, keep resisting the pull of comfortable stupidity, because someone somewhere is waiting for your clarity, and the world is desperate for it. Let's linger here a bit longer, because stupidity, it's not just a social issue. It's existential. It's not just something we see in others. It's something we must wrestle with inside ourselves. Every time we choose convenience over complexity, certainty over curiosity, or allegiance over truth, we flirt with it. And this is where philosophy becomes more than an intellectual exercise. It becomes a form of self-defense against the sleepwalking machinery of the age. Think of Socrates. He wandered the streets of Athens, not with answers, but with questions. He disrupted dinner parties. He annoyed the powerful. He questioned everything, not to destroy, but to awaken. In a society drunk on certainty, he insisted on doubt, and for that he was executed. Because truth, especially uncomfortable truth, is dangerous to systems that rely on compliant stupidity. The same was true for Bonhoeffer. He didn't die because he was confused. He died because he was clear. He saw stupidity not just as a cognitive failure, but as a moral one. He saw that intelligence divorced from courage is useless, and that the only thing more dangerous than a violent regime is a passive public. So what does it mean to live awake? It means noticing when the narrative doesn't quite fit. It means resisting the urge to mock what we don't understand. It means refusing to be entertained by cruelty just because it's convenient. And sometimes, it means standing alone. Albert Camus once said, "The only way to deal with an unfree world is to become so absolutely free that your very existence is an act of rebellion." But that kind of freedom doesn't come cheaply. It means facing the weight of the world with open eyes. It means admitting when you've been part of the problem. It means letting go of the illusion that intelligence equals moral virtue. Because you can read 1,000 books and still choose cowardice. You can hold a PhD in ethics and still remain silent in the face of injustice. True wisdom isn't about what you know. It's about what you do with what you know. As we move into an age of algorithms, deepfakes, and curated realities, the danger of stupidity doesn't vanish. It evolves. Today's stupidity doesn't always look like ignorance. It can look like virality. It can look like outrage. It can even look like intellect, polished, performative, and hollow. And that's the terrifying part, because when stupidity wears the mask of intelligence, it becomes harder to confront. It makes you doubt your instincts. It makes you question your sanity. This is where discernment becomes essential, not just the ability to think, but the ability to think well, with humility, with empathy, with resistance to tribalism. Because if we lose that, if we normalize the aesthetics of stupidity, loud certainty, empty confidence, and blind loyalty, then we risk building a world where truth is just another brand, and in that world, philosophy becomes not just a discipline, but a survival tool. So here's the invitation. Don't just study philosophy. Live it. Let it sharpen your attention. Let it guide your choices. Let it remind you that even in the face of absurdity, you still have agency. Because the antidote to stupidity isn't superiority, it's sincerity. It's the quiet, persistent work of staying human in a world that often rewards the opposite. So ask more questions. Doubt the easy answers. Hold space for nuance. And most of all, choose clarity over comfort, because the world doesn't need more clever people. It needs more awake ones. Let's talk about identity. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Stupidity often hides beneath the mask of who we think we are. The more tightly we cling to labels, national, political, religious, intellectual, the harder it becomes to see outside them. And once a belief becomes part of your identity, questioning it feels like self-betrayal. That's when intelligence begins to serve something else. Ego. We don't reason to find truth. We reason to protect our tribe. We don't ask questions. We search for confirmation. And that, Bonhoeffer would say, is not stupidity in the sense of lack, but stupidity in the sense of surrender. You've handed over your critical faculties in exchange for belonging, and once belonging becomes the priority, truth becomes negotiable. This is why ideology of any kind is dangerous when left unexamined. Ideology promises certainty. It gives you a script, a villain, a side to root for, and in exchange, all it asks is that you stop thinking for yourself. But philosophy, real philosophy, is allergic to certainty. It doesn't give you answers. It gives you friction. It pushes back when you're too sure. It whispers, "Have you considered the opposite?" And that's terrifying, because it means letting go of the fantasy that you're always on the right side of history. It means admitting that you too are capable of being wrong, sometimes catastrophically wrong. We often assume education is the cure, but it's not that simple. No,